Chapter 876, Mastering the Sea Spirits. He came riding on the sea spirits, like a sea god, and stood proudly on the head of the giant whale. The sea spirits at his feet submitted to him. This stunning scene caused deafening cheers to erupt from the Navy headquarters, welcoming the arrival of Cardils. The female soldiers were so excited that they took off their underwear, even though it was cold, and waved them in the wind. The male soldiers, on the other hand, whistled non-stop. Cardils loved this kind of scene, and he waved his arms in the air, beaming from ear to ear. As the tide approached the harbor, he jumped off the head of the giant whale, and a wave of seawater and broken ice formed beneath his feet, carrying him forward gracefully. The terrifying sea creatures obediently stayed in place and did not continue forward. Cardils crossed over the warships and gracefully made his way to shore. The female soldiers immediately threw their laundry at him, and colorful butterflies danced in the air. Cardils reached out and grabbed a sexy, three-piece set, and a wicked smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Wow, these are amazing sizes." Laughter and cheers from the shore grew louder. The female soldier blew a kiss and shouted, "Hey, Cardils, do you want to come to my place tonight and take a break?" Cardils laughed heartily. "I'll think about it." Meanwhile, Captain Bado had just arrived on shore with a group of sailors. Seeing this farcical scene, he took a few deep breaths to suppress his inner restlessness. As a senior naval officer, he hated this kind of showboating. However, Cardils, as the strongest combat force in the ocean fleet, had always been the apple of Commander Douglas's eye. Even as his superior officer, Bado was unable to rein in Cardil's actions. A lowly petty officer is a lowly petty officer. Even if he gains power, he cannot change his vulgar nature, Bado whispered. Cardils was previously just an ordinary corporal. If it weren't for the end of the world, which allowed him to stand out in the Navy's experiments, he would never have become the Navy's darling. Bado thought he was just a guy who had gotten lucky. But his snide remark had attracted the attention of Cardils in the distance. "Hey, Bado. Don't whisper behind my back. You're a captain in the Navy, after all, so this only makes you look petty." Cardils pointed at Bado and said unceremoniously, while walking over to him. Bado didn't expect that Cardils could hear his whisper from such a distance. But he said with his head held high, "Lieutenant Commander Cardils, in the military, you must address someone of higher rank as sir." Cardils suddenly laughed at this, revealing his white teeth. He walked step by step towards Bado, and the several officers next to Bado looked at them with some unease. Cardils was notorious as a lunatic in the Navy. Cardils walked up to Bado and looked down at the Navy captain, who was 5 centimeters shorter than him, with a mocking smile. Cardil's face was beaming with a smile, but his eyes were cold. "In the entire naval base, only Fleet Admiral Douglas is someone I admire. Who the hell are you?" Bado was furious. "Who are you to say such things? You are just a lucky brat who has stumbled upon great power. And I earn my medals through battle after battle." Cardils laughed and shrugged his shoulders. "Oh, my dear Captain Bado. You were right, but that was in the past." He suddenly reached out and placed a hand on Bado's shoulder, his eyes coldly fixed on him. "But right now, you're just a nobody. And I'm the big boss." Fearful emotions were unleashed from Cardil's ice-blue eyes. Bado could only stare at Cardils with wide eyes as he felt a powerful sense of oppression. Fortunately, 2 officers stepped in to break the tension. "Lieutenant Commander Cardils, Admiral Douglas wants to see you immediately. He has something important to tell you." Upon hearing Douglas's name, Cardils finally let go of Bado. The naval captain collapsed as if he had fainted. Cardils didn't even look at him. "If it's the Admiral's summons, I'll go," he finished, stepped over Bado's body, and strode towards the naval base with great strides. If he were not at the headquarters of the Grand Ocean Fleet, he might have really killed Bado and then casually framed it on a neighboring country. But here, he could not just kill a captain at will. After Cardils left, Bado stared at his back with resentment, and then angrily shook off his hat. His colleague next to him advised, "Forget it, Bado. We need him now. Bado took a deep breath and said with a curse-like tone, the military's test subject, let him be arrogant for a while. His future will not end well. His colleague shrugged his shoulders and said, at least for now, we can't afford to provoke him. Chapter 877 Fleet Admiral Douglas. Cardils arrived at Fleet Admiral Douglas's office and met the naval commander who liked to smoke old-fashioned pipes. As the commander of Columbia's naval ace, Fleet Admiral Douglas's prestige in the Navy was extremely high. Even Cardils, an Epsilon-class alien, was willing to follow the orders of this person. This was also due to the post-apocalyptic god-making project in Columbia. All soldiers participating in the experiment had to be guaranteed to be loyal to Columbia and not be madly ambitious. Cardils, for example. His favorite things were women, money, and slot machines. So even though he had great power, he was at most arrogant and domineering, but would never have the idea of overthrowing the high command of the Navy. Because that would be very troublesome for him, and it would be better than the current situation, where the benefits were huge. Cardils met with Fleet Admiral Douglas. The first thing Fleet Admiral Douglas did was glance at the wall clock and say, "You're 2 hours late." Cardils smiled and sat down opposite Fleet Admiral Douglas. "You know, I'm always busy. If I weren't keeping an eye on the East Sea, the Juyu Kingdom fleet would have already made a move. They've always wanted a place in the oceanic region." Fleet Admiral Douglas took a puff on his pipe and exhaled a cloud of white smoke. "Right now, there are more important tasks for you to do." He pushed a document on the table in front of Cardils. "Yesterday afternoon, one of our cruisers was destroyed, and all the crew members were killed. And the other party was just an icebreaker. So we concluded that there were top-level aliens from the Juyu Kingdom on board." Cardils casually flipped through the information on it. The USS Copernicus was carrying 24 heavy missiles and hundreds of high-speed torpedoes. And it was sunk. He touched his chin as he said, "But if the other party was an alien, that seems very reasonable. After all, as you know, this is not a difficult task for me." Cardils said with a smile. Douglas had long since become accustomed to Cardils's character. "The problem is that the loss of a warship and dozens of brave soldiers is a huge loss for us." He knocked on the table and said sternly, "We must respond. We must catch the murderer. If we don't, people will think we've lost control of the ocean." Cardils saw the serious expression on Douglas's face and suppressed his frivolous smile. "Is the opponent very strong?" "There is no critical information yet. But according to our intelligence, the ship came from the Jiangnan region of the Juyu Kingdom, and there are no Epsilon-class aliens in the Jiangnan region." Cardil smiled easily. "If that's the case, there's no need for me to get involved, is there?" Fleet Admiral Douglas said, "But I don't want a dead body. I want a live one. There's very important information on him. If you want to capture him alive, you must do it yourself." Cardil's face was full of a relaxed expression. Although capturing the person was a bit of a hassle, the person on the other side did not even reach the Epsilon level. Moreover, the main battlefield was at sea. For him, this task might waste some time, but there was no risk at all. So he spread out his hands and said, "Since you have personally requested it, I will definitely agree." Fleet Admiral Douglas nodded. "The enemy is crafty and has probably stopped all outward transmissions. The Navy's detection instruments can't find him, so you'll have to use your own abilities to find him." I knew it was going to be a troublesome task. Well, what can I say? I'm a member of the Navy, after all. Anyway, just wait for my good news. Cardil stood up and walked out after listening. "Oh, by the way, Admiral, I have a suggestion for you." He turned back and pointed at Douglas, saying, "Boltoka is a fool. You'd better transfer him out of the ministry as soon as possible. I think it would be great if he were in charge of catching fish at the Ministry of Fisheries." After saying this, he smiled and left Fleet Admiral Douglas's office. Fleet Admiral Douglas took 2 puffs on his pipe, looked at his arrogant appearance, and shook his head with a smile. Although Cardil's character was arrogant, he had to say that he was still a very useful soldier. At the very least, he can complete the tasks assigned to him very well. Douglas can give Cardils whatever he wants. Money, power, women, the vanity of being admired by the masses. As long as he is willing to submit to Fleet Admiral Douglas's management, all of this is negotiable. Cardils walked out of Fleet Admiral Douglas's office. He crossed his arms, let out a breath, and muttered, "What a hassle. I'm the king of the ocean, and I'm being made a searcher. That damned kid better not let me catch him, or I'll stuff you in an octopus's slime for the whole day." Just as he was muttering, a beautiful woman in military uniform and blonde hair walked over in her high heels, holding a stack of documents. Chapter 878, The Rose Squad. Cardil's eyes lit up. The girl in front of him was very beautiful and was his type. In fact, his tastes were very complicated, especially after he had gained his powers. He could even be described as having no preferences. He walked over and blocked the blonde girl's path. "Hello, beautiful lady, what is your name?" When the blonde saw Cardils, she immediately thought of the legends about him, and her heart began to race with nervous excitement. "My name is Juliana, sir." "Juliana, that's a beautiful name, as beautiful as you are." Cardil smiled and took her hand, then put his other arm around her shoulders. "I'm going on a mission soon, so before I go, could you soothe my weary body?" "Sir, but I still have to." "No, no, no. Don't speak, this was your duty, so you cannot refuse." Juliana had to swallow the fact that she was going to deliver important documents to Fleet Admiral Douglas. Because Fleet Admiral Douglas had told everyone around him verbally. If Cardils fancied a woman, he would have her unconditionally. Even if she was the wife of a fleet admiral. Of course, Douglas's wife was not at risk in this regard, because she was already an old woman in her 50s. Cardils did not yet have such perverted interests. Because Zhang Yi had sunk the USS Copernicus, and because the news of the source of God had been leaked, the consequences were undoubtedly huge. Both Zhu Zheng and Fleet Admiral Douglas were actively moving to get their hands on the intelligence about the source of God. Although the Jiannan region was far from being able to compare with the Columbus Ocean Fleet in terms of naval might, he also had his own methods. First, he arranged for Zhang Yi to escape to the southwest. Because there was a survey team he had previously sent on a mission. In the southwestern waters, an area full of islands was enveloped in billowing black smoke that spread towards the sky. The frigid sea of ice was momentarily warmed by the flames. Hundreds of large and small ships had been almost completely destroyed. Tianlong pirates, Captain Bado of the 6th Squad was in a terrible state. His face was being stomped on by a high heel, and his body was covered in horrific wounds, the blood soaking the deck below. "Bado, I will ask you one last time. Where is the lair of the Tianlong King?" The cold voice came from an icy woman. She was wearing a blue and white combat uniform, a white military cap, chestnut naturally curly hair that reached her back, and a determined face. Her ice blue eyes were particularly striking. In particular, her pair of eyebrows, which were as sharp as swords, gave off a solemn feeling. She was the leader of the Rose Squad, Lingu Feishua, the Great Star Lord. Moon Fairy. Bado was covered in wounds, having been tortured beyond recognition, and his body had grown terribly bloated. But in the face of Lingu Feishua's interrogation, he still sneered coldly. "I won't tell you, you stupid bitch. You'll never find the Dragon Island." Lingu Feishua looked at him coldly, then directly exerted her strength with her feet, piercing his eyeball. Bado let out a miserable scream like a pig being slaughtered. At this time, a member of the Rose Squad came over and said to Lingu Feishua, "Captain, an urgent call from headquarters." Upon hearing this, Lingu Feishua said to Bado, "That's enough for today, I've had enough fun." She turned around and left with panache. However, one after the other, huge, colorful bubbles suddenly appeared in the air, as enchanting as a dream. The bubbles gathered around Bado, even drilling into his body through his 7 orifices. Wah-wah. Bado soon suffocated, and he didn't even have the strength to struggle. However, after a moment, his body exploded violently, turning into a sky full of pieces of flesh. Ling Feishue returned to the ship and took over Zhu Zheng's call. "Commander, this is Ling Feishue." Ling Feishue crossed her legs and sat in the chair, and when she spoke to Zhu Zheng, she was as indifferent as usual. Zhu Zheng, however, seemed used to it and did not pursue her rudeness. He simply asked, "How is the mission in the South China Sea going?" Ling Feishue said, "The Tianlong pirates are very cunning, and their lair is always changing. It is very difficult to pinpoint their location. I have just wiped out their 6th Brigade, but at the rate these pirates are expanding in the South China Sea, I'm afraid it won't help. Soon they will use refugees from all sides to expand their power." Zhu Zheng said, "Put this task aside for the time being, there is another important matter that needs to be completed." "Oh?" Ling Feishue's eyes revealed a strange luster. "Changing the mission halfway through?" This was the first time this had happened. Zhu Zheng would not have made this choice if it were not for a particularly important emergency. Because any mission requires a long period of preparation before action can be taken. Zhu Zheng said solemnly, "Chaos has set sail on a mission and has now run into trouble with the Columbia Navy. I have instructed him to flee in the direction of where you are. You must go and meet him immediately. Be sure to bring him back safely." When Ling Feishue heard the word chaos, she revealed a curious expression for the first time. Chaos? Wasn't he the one who defeated Gao Changkong? The mission that could get that person to move must be very important. Ling Feishue didn't ask any more questions. "I understand, I will go and meet him." Zhu Zheng continued, "In order to avoid being discovered by the Columbia Navy, they are unable to contact the outside world. You will have to find a way to find them on the vast ocean. I have transmitted their information to you." Ling Feishue smiled. "Okay, I understand." After ending the call, Ling Feishue looked up some information about the Golden Front and Zhang Yi. She gave a faint smile and immediately gave orders to all the team members. "Kill all the pirates here, and then we'll turn around and head south." Guyu Fei. A female team member with long hair came up to Ling Feishue. "Captain." Ling Feishue told her what she was looking for. "Ask your friends to help you find the ship from the Huashu Kingdom." Guyu Fei immediately went to the side of the ship after receiving the order. She placed her hands in front of her chest, opened her cherry lips slightly, and unexpectedly produced a beautiful and magical sound. Ability codename Aria. This ability allows her to communicate with all living things. After more than 10 minutes, a group of dolphins passed through the layers of broken ice, emitting shrill cries in response to Guyu Fei. Guyu Fei gave them a gentle smile, looked down at them, and asked them to help find the boat. The dolphins cheerfully responded to Guyu Fei, and then dove into the water and swam in all directions. Chapter 879 Regional Cooperation. Zhu Zheng let out a small sigh of relief after finishing contacting the Rose Squad. However, he knew very well that the Rose Squad alone could not contend with the Columbia Navy. There had to be a powerful naval force that could hold off the Columbia Navy and buy Zhang Yi and the Rose Squad some time to escape. Otherwise, even if Zhang Yi and the others managed to escape to the ends of the earth, they would be unable to find their way back to Jiangnan region at sea. "We must talk to Old Li." Zhu Zheng sighed. Not long ago, the Columbia Navy had contacted him. It was just an official document expressing the righteousness of their actions. Of course, they made no mention of their attempt to forcibly seize the ship, and only brought up the sinking of the USS Copernicus by Zhang Yi. When major powers act, they still need a reason to act, and that was the basic understanding between them. As for Zhu Zheng's explanation, Fleet Admiral Douglas simply wouldn't respond. Therefore, Zhu Zheng planned to contact the East Sea region and ask them to help him buy some time for Zhang Yi. However, in order to do that, he would have to pay a sufficient price. Zhu Zheng turned on his computer, thought for a moment, and sent a picture to Li Guangxiao. Then he sat at his desk and waited silently for Li Guangxiao's response. Sure enough, a few minutes later, Li Guangxiao's message came through. Zhu Zheng connected the video call. On the video end, Li Guangxiao's face was full of a smile, but also a hint of urgency. Lao Zhu, did you find the source of God? They both had information about the source of God, which Xinjing district had given them. Although Xinjing district would not share the source of God, they would share intelligence with them. After all, the 6 districts were family and depended on each other. Therefore, both Zhu Zheng and Li Guangxiao had seen a picture of the source of God. Because of this, Li Guangxiao became excited as soon as he saw the picture. Zhu Zheng said with a smile, "Don't worry, Li, just listen to me." He explained the whole story to Li Guangxiao, but withheld a lot of crucial information. He only said that he had gone to sea to rescue someone who knew information about the source of God. He kept all the information about Li Zongyu a secret. After listening to Zhu Zheng's words, Li Guangxiao couldn't help but gasp. That kid of yours is really ruthless. He even dared to directly sink a Columbia cruiser in the open ocean. In the past, an incident like this could have triggered a major war between countries. Zhu Zheng snorted, "It's not the peaceful times anymore. Besides, if they didn't attack first, how would my people have fought back?" Li Guangxiao stretched out his voice, "Oh, if it's for the source of God, this is very reasonable. Not to mention sinking a cruiser, even if it means fighting them, it's worth it." Nowadays, many of the world's top powers are aware of the existence of the source of God. No one knows when this mysterious thing appeared. But its power is extremely amazing, and it can promote a top-notch Delta-class anomaly to Epsilon. Everyone knows how strong an Epsilon-class anomaly is. The higher up the hierarchy, the greater the strategic significance of such anomalies. With the advent of the Great Mutation era, there will be more and more anomalies. It is even possible that in the future, ordinary soldiers will be replaced by anomalies. At that time, the presence of thermal weapons will become weaker and weaker. If countries want to maintain their power, they must make plans in advance. The power of weapons is limited. The power of aliens is far from having reached its upper limit. Li Guangxiao said to Zhu Zheng, "You want my people to help you, don't you?" Zhu Zheng smiled slightly, "That was exactly what I was thinking." Li Guangxiao laughed, and the old fox already began to consider the cost-effectiveness of doing so in his heart. They were currently facing off against Columbia in the East Sea, and in fact, no one dared to make a move. Strictly speaking, the naval forces of the East Sea region and the Columbus Ocean Fleet were about equal in strength. However, they had the advantage of being on home soil and could launch missiles from the land to directly attack Columbia's fleet and even its headquarters. It's not that we can't help you, but we can at most hold them back, and won't really engage them in a large-scale naval battle. In addition, you must share the intelligence from the source of God with me in due course. Li Guangxiao directly made his request. Zhu Zheng and Li Guangxiao were old friends and both came from military backgrounds, so there was no need for any unnecessary words. Li Guangxiao's conditions were not excessive, and Zhu Zheng did need their help, so he agreed. Good, when the time comes to obtain the source of God, we can join forces. Good, I will immediately send someone to the East Sea to put pressure on them. However, the two did not discuss how the source of God would be divided. It wasn't that they didn't want to talk about it, but so far, apart from some people in Xinjiang, no one else had come into contact with it. They didn't even know what the source of God actually looked like, or whether it could be divided. But one thing was clear in both of their minds. When there was an external enemy, they must join forces to resolve the external conflict first. Laoli, you must do your best. After all, the person I sent out is very important to the Jiangnan region. If you can't handle the pressure, then I might have to go to Xinjiang for help, Zhu Zheng said with a heavy heart. Regardless of Zhang Yi's attitude, he was indeed the most powerful fighter in the Jiangnan region. No matter what, Zhu Zheng had to protect Zhang Yi. The Jiangnan region had already suffered a series of setbacks and could not afford to lose another top fighter. Li Guangxiao really felt the pressure. If Xinjiang gets involved in this matter, I'm afraid they'll all just be drinking soup. Because Xinjiang's style of doing things has always been overbearing, coupled with the terror of the Hell's Guillotine ability holder, once they make a move, neither Jiangnan nor Donghai will be able to compete. Lao Zhu, what are you talking about? Our East Sea region is not that bad. Li Guangxiao said angrily, just you wait and see. What's this nonsense about being number one in the world? Lao Zi will fight the elite. Zhu Jing nodded with a smile, very well, then I'll count on you. I won't let you go in vain. The military rations for this operation will be supplied by our Jiangnan region. Jiangnan was wealthy and occupied one of the two major granaries in the Central Plains. Now it is slowly recovering after the end of the world and has begun to use its technological capabilities to restore its productivity. Its combat power may not be as good as that of the East Sea region and Xinjiang, but in terms of supplies, it is the envy of other regions. Good, then we have a deal. After the two men had finished their discussion, Li Guangxiao immediately ordered that all movements of the Colombian Navy be monitored. Furthermore, in order to show sufficient deterrence, he directly dispatched the four most powerful naval formations in the East Sea region, heading towards the direction of Neon Rope Island. Chapter 880, Juyu. Due to Zhang Yi sinking the USS Copernicus, the entire East Sea region was in an uproar. The Columbus Ocean Fleet, in order to obtain intelligence on the source of God, did not hesitate to deploy their most powerful battlecruiser, the Cardils. The Jiangnan region and East Sea region of the Huaxu Kingdom also sent sufficient manpower. Their goal was completely the same, which was to block all news and prevent Zhang Yi from proceeding blindly in the vast ocean. Like the butterfly effect, the actions of the two major powers also set off huge ripples in the surrounding area, involving many small countries. No one outside the two countries knew the reason for the naval standoff. The only information that has been made public is that it is due to the sinking of a Colombian warship. However, everyone knows that in such extraordinary times, the two superpowers are unlikely to start a war lightly. If they do, it must be because of some huge benefit or conflict. However, neither Jiangnan, the East Sea region, nor the Columbus Ocean Fleet could possibly let this slip. Even at the highest levels of the Xinjiang region or Colombia itself, they have tacitly chosen to keep it a secret. After all, they wanted to keep the source of God for themselves, rather than share it with others. The 6 regions of the Huaxu Kingdom were closely related, but each had its own power to govern the region. The same was true of Colombia. The states united and fought against each other, and were also divided into multiple groups. They could unite when dealing with outsiders. But when there was no external pressure, they would also compete with each other for power and the right to speak. In short, the situation in the East Sea quickly became a mess. Li Guangxiao, the supreme commander of the East Sea region, directly ordered the 4 most powerful formations under his command to march to the East Sea to intimidate Fleet Admiral Douglas. These 4 formations were manned by the 4 top aliens in the East Sea region. Due to official secrecy, no personal information about them is known to the outside world. It is only known that in the official announcement, they were named after the 4 ancient spirits of the Huaxu Kingdom. They were the Azure Dragon, the White Tiger, the Vermilion Bird, and the Black Tortoise. It was said that the 4 captains of the East Sea region had not had an easy time obtaining these titles. Because these 4 titles were so popular, many top-level aliens from other regions had hoped to obtain them as well. However, in the end, all the contenders gave up on the competition. There was only one reason: they had sensed the gap in strength. The 4 Spirit Fleet set out, approaching the headquarters of the Columbus Ocean Fleet and looking across the sea at the major ports of Rope Island. This forced Fleet Admiral Douglas to mobilize a large number of ships to confront them. This also relieved a great deal of pressure on Zhang Yi. Blizzard City. Zhu Jing had been busy for 2 days straight dealing with Zhang Yi's situation. His phone basically rang non-stop. This involved a game of major powers, and no detail could be overlooked. Especially since this matter had become big news, the other major regions of the Huaxu Kingdom were paying attention. First, there were the inquiries from the Xinjiang region, and Zhu Jing had to find a way to explain things. They had to keep the conflict within threshold limits, and they could not let the war escalate because of Zhang Yi or a copy of the Source of God. After all that busyness, Zhu Jing was exhausted, both mentally and physically. but he felt that it had all been worthwhile. Because Li Lingxue had once said, Zhang Yi's ceiling was definitely not just delta level. He is one of the extremely rare people with epsilon talent or above. There is only one such person in hundreds of millions of people. And the strongest being known in the Huaxu Kingdom so far, the transcendent being in Xinjiang region with the ability of Hell's Guillotine, codenamed Ho-Tu, is this kind of natural epsilon. If Zhang Yi can obtain the source of God, he may be able to have a power no less than Ho-Tu. By then, Jiangnan region, will also be able to shed the hat of being the weakest of the 6 regions. Zhu Jing took a deep breath and muttered to himself. Zhang Yi's loyalty was unquestionable. At the beginning, Gao Changkong almost killed him, and it was Zhang Yi who saved him. The most crucial point was that he was a person who had no desire for power, and such a person was the one Zhu Jing could trust the most. If even Zhang Yi cannot be trusted, then no one in the entire Blizzard City will be able to gain his trust. However, at this moment, he couldn't help but think of Gao Changkong again, and he sighed. If Zhang Yi had the talent of Epsilon, Gao Changkong might also have it. It's just that the past is too hard to look back on. Now that both sides are in an unswerving position, it's hard to talk about right and wrong. Just as Zhu Jing was sighing with emotion, Lan Xinchen came to report that Li Lingxue from the research department had come to see him. She also brought a little girl with her, said Lan Xinchen, glancing at Li Lingxue next to him and the little girl behind her, who was timidly hiding behind Li Lingxue's legs. She looked only 5 or 6 years old, with big eyes but a strange ethereality. Innocent and ignorant, she looked like an angel who had just been born into the world, with an unworldly beauty. Lan Xinchen couldn't understand why Li Lingxue would bring such a child with her. However, Li Lingxue had a bad reputation from the start. Everyone who knew her considered her a scientific monster who often did things that no one else could understand. Zhu Zheng's eyes flashed with a strange expression when he heard this. Let them come over. Yes. Lan Xinchen allowed Li Lingxue and the little girl to go and see Zhu Zheng. Since the Gao Changkong incident, the security level around Zhu Zheng had been raised. Anyone who wanted to see him had to go through multiple layers of verification. Apart from a very few people like Zhang Yi, no one else could ever meet Zhu Zheng directly. The guard Sun Luxuan, on the other hand, ate and slept with Zhu Zheng and never left his side for even a moment. It is said that this caused Zhu Zheng's wife to feel a little resentful, but as a mature woman, she was able to overcome such trivial matters on her own. Li Lingxue led the angelic little girl to Zhu Zheng's office. And she is? Zhu Zheng looked at the little girl, pointed at her curiously, and asked Li Lingxue, what's her serial number? Li Lingxue wore thick black-rimmed glasses, and had dark circles under her eyes. She always looked like she hadn't slept. Test subject 486. She is the most special one, and the only successful product to have hatched so far. Zhu Zheng's expression suddenly became agitated. He stood up from his chair and walked over to the girl, who looked confused and ignorant, like a hatchling that had just hatched. The girl hid behind Li Lingxue with some trepidation. Li Lingxue said to herself, she incorporates our latest technology and materials, and her comprehensive data index is extremely high in all aspects. It can be said that she is the most perfect test product we have obtained since the end of the world. Zhu Zheng, however, reached out to stop Li Lingxue from continuing to speak. No, don't call her that. She deserves her own name. Zhu Zheng squatted down and stared at the little girl with a kind face. From now on, you will be called Juyu. From afar I know that my brother has climbed to the top of a high mountain, but there is one less person among the red berries. The girl blinked her big eyes and whispered, Juyu.